Dear candidate, I welcome you to the defense of the work that you have invested time to. The time you have does not exceed 1 hour. You may need to introduce yourself to the panelists again, and then you can start on your presentation.
Before I proceed, I hope you bear with me. I think because of age, the stairs don't do me well. So, but I hope I will stabilize. I've taken my medicine. I hope I'm going to stabilize as time goes on. My topic is teacher supervisory competences and students' academic performance in ordinary level government aided schools in Hoima district, Uganda. And in the first slide, I give an outline of how my presentation is going to be. And in chapter 1, I give the introduction. We all are aware that teachers are the ones who provide the platform for a right to education for our students at either level, either primary, secondary, or even university, so that they can get the strategic learning for better understanding and academic performance. This is in line with the Constitution of Uganda, which provides the right to education for all citizens. I realized that the TISA report of 2023 and the National Teacher Policy underscored the need for professionalization of teachers for effectiveness in Uganda. And that's why my study is rotating around there. I have the historical perspective of the study. I realized that previous studies, Socrates, Roscoe, and Sekamo and the others, considers supervisory competencies in the informal sector, where you find that these people were carrying out, the elders were supervising the youth, where Socrates was supervising Plato and Plato was supervising Aristotle to make sure that they get skills. But this was outside the school setting, though later Plato ended up establishing the academy, and so he brought the supervisory role back into the school system, introduced the supervisory role into the school system. Both of them focused on getting the practical skills to the learner. The Chinese and USA focused on formal job effectiveness of supervising the worker or the subordinate, but this was outside the education sector. And when we move nearer to Uganda, we find that the British colonialists in Africa introduced supervision of teachers in the education sector, but they were mainly looking at the instructional supervision of head teachers over teachers who are already professional, but the purpose was to emphasize their effectiveness at work. Theoretically, I have two theories which guided the study, two major theories that guided the study, the one of self-efficacy by Bandura and the one of clinical supervision model by Protocol. These focused on the general teacher competences, that is Bandura, and then Protocol focused on the health sector, but none of them looked at the teacher supervisory competences in relation to students' academic performance. And so I found there was a gap which needed to be addressed. Conceptually, we find that the concepts, my key concepts are supervision, teacher supervisory competences, and student academic performance. And find that teacher supervisory competences include, according to this study, the interpersonal competences, the leadership supervisory competences, and then the managerial competences. And then we have the student academic performance, where we look at basically their performance at O level in UNEB exams, though there are other components that I'll be mentioning as we go on. And you find that in all secondary schools, especially those which are government aided, teachers are supposed to be professionally competent because they are trained as professionals, and therefore they are able to handle issues that arise in relation to teaching and learning. There are also known policies that exist to guide them, which formed the conceptual perspective, like there are policies concerning timetabling, concerning supervision by head teachers, assessment, attendance, co-curricular activities. All these are to ensure that students perform well. Contextual perspective placed the study within a large context, whereby I focused on Hoima district, which has 11 government-aided schools, but out of those I concentrated on 9, I will explain later. And those authors whom I've given did some work in Hoima district specifically, but they did not cover teacher supervisor competencies and academic performance of students in these schools. I find that majority of O-level students score between 4th and 9th division, whereby 50.8 to 58.1% of all the students who sit exams every year, the UNEB exams nationally and even local at the district level, score in the 4th and 9th division. These are tables which are explaining what I'm giving from UNEB. The first one, table 1.1, is summarizing the academic performance of students in O level. And you see that in the last column, where I saw percentage in division 4 and 9, 2015, 57.7, 2016, 58.1, 2017, 51.1, 2018, 54.2, and 2019, 50.8. That means the majority, above average, do not perform well. And when you move to table 1.2, I find that in Hoima district in 2014, 56% were in division 4 and 9, 2015, 53.2, and 2016, 55.8. All that is an indicator that there was poor performance in the district. The model that formed the base of this study is given, whereby number one, we find that all the teachers successfully complete secondary education before they move on to university study in education. And then they are deployed to teach. And then they're involved in teaching and many other school activities, including co-curricular activities. But they don't operate independently. They work under a school environment, which determines the student environment. So this means that they are professionally trained and they are having the ability to make the students perform. The statement of the problem. This study was premised on the fact that despite the continued instruction of teachers and supervision by professionally competent teachers, students' academic performance has continued to be poor in O-level guided schools in Hoima district. This was evidenced by the performance decline and the low pass rates, as I've already shown you in tables above. And specifically in 2018 and 2019, I find that only 34.8 were able to pass in division 1, 2, and 3. And in 2019, only 48.3 were able to pass. This was quite an indicator that there is poor performance. And what made this a serious problem is that in the past, like in the 1970s, these government schools, government-aided schools like Duhaga SS, Kitara SS, Satitowin SS, Wicha Muslim SS, used to perform well and were competitive even with other schools in the other districts. But then their performance went down in the 21st century, hence the call for this study. The purpose of the study was to assess the extent to which teacher supervisory competencies affect students' academic performance in these schools in the district, so that I can be able to develop a model for evaluating application of these teacher supervisory competencies. The specific objectives and research questions. One was to analyze how teacher supervisory competencies affect students' academic performance in O-level guided schools, O-level government-aided schools in the district. Two was to assess the influence of school factors on application of supervisory competencies in these schools. And three was to evaluate the effect of these school factors on students' academic performance. The research questions follow suit the objectives. Hypothesis, I had three now hypotheses according to objectives. One was there is no significant effect of teacher supervisory competences on students' academic performance in these O-level government-aided schools. Two was school factors have no significant influence on application of supervisory competences in these schools. And then three, there is no significant effect of school factors on students' academic performance. Geographical scope, the study was carried out in Hoima district. It has 2 counties, Chigorobi and Bugahia, and 8 sub-counties. It has 1 state council. Hoima town is a state council and is located in Western Uganda. The school has 9 government-aided schools, which I included in my study, because these were established long ago with relevant buildings, land, and all facilities, which really are enabling environment for the teachers to competently do their work. The content scope focused on teacher supervisory competences and students' academic performance. And I had the school environment or school factors as a mediator, because a teacher cannot apply his competences unless has a suitable environment to use. The time course was 5 years between 2015 and 2019, because during that time, as I've already shown you, the decline was high for these USE schools. Literature review was categorized under 2, literature survey in the district and literature review from elsewhere. And then the knowledge and contextual and methodological and theoretical gaps were identified. In the literature survey, I find that Arjuna considered administrative practices of head teachers in relation to students' academic performance, while Glover considered teaching methods and availability of these teaching resources. He considered how they influence on people performance, but he focused on primary level. And then Kuza looked at responsibility of teachers in learning mathematics so as to carry out their work, but did not consider the current problem being addressed. Theoretically, the 2 theories, Bandura's self-efficacy, focused on organizations and education in general, and then the health sector, which was looked on by protocols, clinical supervision, and not necessarily the education sector. I find that there were knowledge and contextual gaps. For example, a number of studies that have been done focused on pedagogical, personal, and the general competences at academic level, at different levels, at primary, secondary, or even tertiary education in districts of Uganda and international level. For example, Musana focused on Kaliro TTC, that was a tertiary education, was looking at how teacher competences affect student academic performance at that level. And you have Sebuyungo, who focused on Kiboga district. He looked at government-aided schools in Kiboga districts and how teacher competences affect their performance. And so you find that they did not really focus on this particular study which I'm looking at. And all these studies and many others which have not indicated looked at school factors as those affecting students' academic performance, but not as influencers to teacher application of supervisory competencies. So I found that there was a gap, and this was a new area that needed investigation. Methodologically, I find that several studies, as indicated there, used different scopes, and some of them looked at the primary level, others looked at secondary, others considered only the realistic ontological position in quantitative paradigm, or qualitative, but hardly both. For me, I used both of them, and so there was a methodological gap to be addressed. The conceptual framework, teacher supervisor competences and students' academic performance. I had the teacher supervisor competences as an independent variable, broken down into interpersonal competences, leadership competences, and managerial competences. And the dependent variable was academic performance of students, which comprised of academic achievement, class attendance, student retention rates, career clarity, and vocational skills. And I had the mediating variable as school factors, which had teacher professional preparedness, mainly focusing on the training policy and teaching, learning facilities and materials, and teachers' time management behavior. Concerning research methodology, the research paradigm I used, I realized that if I'm to measure the contribution of teacher supervisory competencies on student academic performance, I would use the positivism philosophy. However, it alone, it was not sufficient. And so I decided to use both. I decided to use the positive philosophy paradigm, which guided this study by having both the quantitative and the qualitative. The research approach was the deductive and inductive because I had to test the hypothesis, and so I had to use both. And the research design was descriptive and correlation designs because I had to get the relationships of the variables that I had in my study. The unit of analysis, my unit of analysis was mainly teachers because these are the people who had the information since I'm looking at their supervisory competencies. But I also had a unit of observation where I was able to pick some information to substitute what I would get from the teachers. Those were the head teachers, the student leader representatives, the PTA, and Board of Governors, executive committees. The study population. I have the majority were the teachers according to the district records in Hoima district archives. The teachers formed a total of 1,406, and the representative of student leaders were 814. The head teachers were 37 in all the schools, that is government aided and private. And then education managers at county and district level were 6. The PT executives were 555. Board of Governors Executive Committee were 448, and making a total of 3,266 as the total population. Out of that, I was able to get the target population of 803, and then the sample size ended up being 243, where the teachers took the majority with 20.1%. No, 59.6% with 145 teachers. I used, concerning data collection methods and instruments, I used the survey method. The instrument was questionnaire, and I applied it on teachers and representatives of student leaders. And there is a justification given us in the table. And then I used the in-depth interviews, where the instrument was interview guide on head teachers, education officers, and representatives of the board of directors, board of governors, and PTA executives. Again, the justification is given. And then the documentary review, where I had to look at the records, both from the district and at the various schools that I had to visit. Validity and reliability tests. The content validity index was applied on teachers and student leaders because those are the two groups where I administered the questionnaires, and the score was 0.92 and 0.95, which was above the 0.6, which is recommended as standard by Amin. So the content validity was okay for the questionnaires that I administered. And then the reliability of the questionnaires was measured by internal consistency using the Cronbach and the alpha test. And I had a percentage of 73.4 for teachers and 91.8 for the student leaders. And this was quite above the 70, which is recommended again by Amin. And so I took it that all the questions asked were relevant on the objectives. I did a preliminary pilot study in Hoima district in the 2 schools which were not involved in my sample. You remember I told you there are 11 schools. The 2 schools were left out because they had not graduated. They had not existed for more than 5 years. One was 3 years and another one had the first class of candidate classes sitting in 2020. So I left them out, but I used them for pilot testing. And then there are a bit of qualitative findings was done by testing the degree of credibility, conformability, and transferability to other contexts in the schools. I also employed a moderator to independently look at my findings to avoid any bias. Data analysis, I had quantitative data analyzed using descriptive, that is the percentages, the mean and the standard deviation, and then the inferential statistics, the Pearson coefficient correlation and linear regressions. And the qualitative, I transcribed and analyzed thematically by use of content analysis technique. I had limitations to the study. Number one, they were mainly on methodological issues. Originally, I thought I would look at all the 11 government-aided schools in the district. However, I found that 2 of them did not qualify, as I've already explained. So I had to reduce my scope to 9 schools. And then additionally, the research design was able to, when I was writing my proposal, I indicated that I'm going to include tape recordings of interviewers, of the people I'm going to interview. But when I reached there, they refused that they are not going to be recorded. So I had luckily enough a research assistant by my side. I had to ask him to take the records, as I also note some of them as I continue interviewing them. The philosophical and historical aspects of teacher supervisor competences, I have picked these to represent the others. For example, I have Socrates. I've already talked about him, who was informally teaching the student and supervising. I have also the Jean Piaget, who introduced the pedagogy theory of selecting, making sure that the right tools are used to teach or to train the teachers, the learner. And so it was monitoring to make sure that the learner was actually being attended to. And then I have Plato, who first introduced the formal school education, and his student Aristotle. And then I have, I think because of time, I will not go through all of them. I just go to the main key philosopher, that was Emmanuel Lavina, with his existentialism. He focused on human sociality. He believed that where people are responsible to one another, and so as they come closer and they interact, you are able to learn the bits which a person may not even have told you, and therefore you are able to help that person to perform better. I believe that if I took this philosophy between they come closer to the student, the teachers come closer to the student, they will be able to discover even what the teachers not or her academic performance. And in this way, they would be able to improve on their academic performance with the teacher facilitating this. Chapter 5 was on teacher supervisory competences. The effect of teacher supervisory competences on students' academic performance in these all-level government-aided schools. And the teacher supervisory competences include interpersonal leadership and managerial competences of those teachers who were in the district of Hoima, is below in table 5.1. I have in one column supervisory competence, I have the mean score, the deviation, and the interpretation. I find that concerning interpersonal supervisory competences, the mean score was 3.77, which exceeded expectation, much as the standard deviation indicated that all respondents were not in line, were not in agreement fully to the questionnaires that were given, because it exceeded one. It was above one and above. Then leadership, supervisory competence, I had the mean score of 3.48, and it also exceeded expectation. And since it was, the standard deviation was below one, then it was accepted that majority of the respondents were in agreement. And then managerial, I had 3.36, which also exceeded expectation, and the standard deviation was below one. The findings continue on the Likert 5 Likert scale. I find that the mean score for all these variables was indicated that all the three scored at least above 3.35, 3.30, which according to this scale, they were meeting the expectation. And that means that the teachers' competences had significant influence on students' academic performance. Qualitative findings confirmed this as given below. On the theme of teacher interpersonal relations with students, I find that the interviews which I carried out among the teachers tended to be, the main response was teachers tended to be closer to their students, which indicated good and interpersonal competences because of that close relations, as quoted by one of the head teacher respondents. This was in line with the findings of Chigongo, Rada, and Ministry of Education. On the second theme of teacher classroom leadership role, I find that students looked at teachers as their role models, as their leaders, as their somebody to be meant to mentor them. And so you find that because of that looking unto them as leaders, it made the teachers, it made the students look at them as those who have the competences to lead them, leadership competences, because they were able to work with the students and to guide them and to be role models during instruction and in many other activities as indicated in this response. On the third theme of teacher managerial supervisory competences, PTA members disclosed that teachers actually enabled their students to gain some managerial skills, for example, in time management and using the various instructional materials, like when going in the laboratory or in the computer lab, the teachers now are able to pass on this skill to the student. And this indicated that their management competences are also recognized and they can exhibit them among the students. Findings on students' academic performance. I have already illustrated the academic students' performance between the period 2015 and 2019, where I indicated those who scored in division 4 and 5 and therefore had performed poorly. So this time I decided to look at those who qualified to join A level by looking at the percentage of those in particular years, the percentage of those who were between division 1 and division 3. In 2015, it was only 43.6%, which was below average. In 2016, it was 40.7%, and 2017, 38.3%, 2018, 34.8%, and 2019, But you find that all these percentages are below average, which means there is poor performance of students, academic performance of students in these schools. And therefore, it becomes necessary to analyze, to apply maybe the Pearson correlation so that I can prove the extent to which students were performing poorly in relation to the teacher supervisory competencies. The correlation analysis was done between teachers and supervisory competencies in relation to students' academic performance. And I had a score of 0.667, which is 66.7. It indicated that there was a moderate positive significant relationship between students' academic performance and the teacher supervisory competencies. This also was interpreted as a change in teacher supervisory competencies would definitely improve students' academic performance by 66.7. And so both of them would move in the same direction if that change took place. Chapter 2 looked at school factors and teacher supervisory competencies. The objective of this chapter was to assess the influence of school factors on application of teacher supervisory competencies in these schools. And the factors that were considered under school factors are teacher professional preparation, teacher teaching and learning facilities and materials, that is the school environment, and teachers' time management behavior. A statistical assessment was carried out on these factors, and the following were the findings. I tried to summarize the table. The details are in my book, which I submitted, and find that under professional preparation as one of the factors, the mean score was 3.52, which exceeded expectation, and the teaching, learning facilities and materials had the 3.58. And then teachers' time management was 3.78. All those findings confirm that. I'll move on to I have before the interpretation of the table I've presented, and then I have the qualitative findings which confirmed from the PTA, from the head teachers, and the board of governors, confirming what was presented. And then I move on to the correlation between school factors and teacher supervisory competences, where I had teacher supervisory competences scoring 0.532, which turns into 53.2%. And I find that holding other factors constant, I find that teacher supervisory competences were significantly dependent on school factors by that percentage of 28.3. Okay, chapter 7 looked at the effect of school factors on students' academic performance. And I find that the objective was to evaluate the effect of school factors on students' academic performance in these schools. And I've already pointed out the variables of students' academic performance in the conceptual framework. And the figures that I got in the coefficient table, I find that there was 60.629, which was the better figure. And this indicated a moderate positive relationship between school factors and students' academic performance in the district. And it was interpreted that the school factors accounted for 63% of the students' academic performance, which makes the latter dependent on the former. And the remaining percentage of 37% was attributed to other factors outside this study. For example, like maybe parental care, which was not part of this study, or even the leadership styles of the head teachers. I also tested this hypothesis with the model summary, where the results indicated that school factors are a significant predictor of students' academic performance by 39.2%. And so the hypothesis number 3 was tested as null and was rejected. Contribution to knowledge, chapter 8. This chapter was purposed to examine the effect of teacher supervisory competences on students' academic performance in all-level government schools in Hoima district, with an intention of advancing a model to evaluate the supervision competencies, practices of teachers so that performance can be improved. I find that from the analysis, we have already seen that the school environment under school factors has a contribution that it makes on this application of teacher supervisory competencies in relation to students' academic performance. We find that when teachers come to school, they participate in a given environment, but some of the things in that school environment may be hindering their effective application of their competencies, supervisory competencies. For example, accommodation, meals, and even the pay, find that they were extremely lacking. I know that we are all aware that in government schools, or what we call the seed schools, some people call them the seed schools, these schools, the government doesn't provide accommodation for teachers, it doesn't provide accommodation for students. And that was a challenge to the teacher I talked to. Because, for example, I looked at one school in Chugorobia, which is like 9 kilometers from Hoima town. And around it, there are no presentable houses. And so the teachers commute from Hoima town every morning to go and teach, and they have to go back. So it depends, it means if you don't have the money that day, you don't go to work, or you are likely even to go late because you are staying away. Philosophically, find that emphasis was on professionalizing the teacher and motivating him to ensure close supervisor-supervisee relationship so that student academic performance can be improved. We have already looked at the Pearson correlation analysis, which indicated and a significant relationship, positive relationship on students' academic performance. And then looked at the supervisory or school factors, which had a moderate rating, where the professional preparation scored 64, and the teaching and learning facilities 54%, while the teacher time management behavior scored 53%, implying that there was a gap because these were not scoring 80% or 100%. A regression analysis was also carried out on that objective. We have already looked at the results. And then in objective 3, we have already seen that there would be an improvement in students' academic performance by 78% if the supervisory factors or the school factors were available. Hence, I developed the supervision competence evaluating practices of teachers model, the safety model, to address these gaps. And I know that if this is integrated in the existing policies, there for improved professionalization, then there would be better performance among the teachers, among the students. Figure 9 presents that model, where I have part A, where there are the teacher supervisory competences, which if you follow arrow 1, which indicates that if teacher supervisory competences are okay, then academic performance of students would be improved. And then you have number 2, arrow number 2, where we have the school factors, which also contribute or influence how teachers apply their teacher supervisory competences. And then we have arrow number 3, which goes from school factors to innovative supervision programs. I expressed that if teachers introduced innovative supervision programs like individual supervision and team supervision, then there would be improved academic performance as indicated by arrow number 4, connecting to academic performance. And then in addition to that, I have arrow number 5, which indicates that the supervision competence evaluating practices of teachers, which include innovative supervision, creative supervision competences, integrative supervision competences, and collaborative supervision. If all those were applied by the teachers, then we are likely to achieve good academic performance as indicated by arrow 6. And then arrow 7 indicates that if those supervisory competences are improved and this model is included even in the policy brief, then arrow 7 would finally lead to teacher supervisory competences, which would automatically be also improved. And then I have arrow number 8 above, which indicates that if the teacher supervisory competences are improved, then the box E, which is on supervisory competences, would also continuously be improved. This is a process, not a one-time thing, but it's going to be continuous. These are explanations of what I've already given, assumptions of the model. Operationalization of the safety model. I consider that the Ministry of Education, the Directorate of Education Standards and Unity would, if they adopt these ones, they would develop and approve the safety policy down here. And then, sorry. And then the teacher supervisory competence stakeholders would also take up that policy, which would be implemented by development of the safety policy, operational plan and standards. This would be by the local governments, the Ministry of Education, the teacher associations, board of directors, and the PTAs. And then this would move on to service delivery points, the secondary schools and teacher training institutions like universities, where if it's also taken up as a policy, it will enable the rolling out and implementation of this safety model policy standards to all schools, because the teachers now would go to implement what they have got in the schools. And this would result into improved academic performance because of this model. I tested testability of the safety model. I tested the model in 2 districts, in Kanungu district and in Rukungiri district. The control group was in Kanungu district, where I found that the frequency for integrative supervisory competencies leads to academic performance scored the highest percentage of 33.3%. And so it was the most acceptable among the teachers that I used in the control group. I looked actually at their During seasons, they had 40-minute lessons, and then the double lesson of 80 minutes. So I made sure that at least each teacher, I first that teacher twice for the single lesson and then the double lesson, and administered the questionnaires which are attached in my book, and these are the ratings that I got. For the other uncontrolled group, the details are in my book. Because of time, I did not include them here. And I come to the conclusions. In objective 1, I found that there was a moderate positive significant effect on students' academic performance by teacher supervisor competencies, meaning that they are unable to improve. There is a possibility of improving students' academic performance. And then in objective 2, I found a high significant influence of these factors on teacher supervisory competencies in the application, meaning that the teachers can, the school factors or the supervisory factors enable teachers to effectively apply the supervisory competencies that they have. Without them, there would be a problem. Then objective 3, supervisory factors were found to have a significant predictor on students' academic performance with that moderate positive significant effect, meaning that they were again significantly dependent. Students' academic performance was significantly dependent on supervisory factors or school factors. Recommendations. Number 1, I recommend that the headmasters, the parents, the PTA, and the board of governors should support teachers to ensure that they improve in their practice of teacher supervisor competences, even as they monitor student learning. Number 2, I recommend that the governments and the National Council for Higher Education, they should ensure that these teacher training institutions put in place programs which benefit the teachers, but also enable them to master those supervisory competencies and apply them in the field. And number 3, I recommended that district representatives of Ministry of Education, that is the DEOs, should encourage head teachers and PTAs and parents to be in partnership so that they can ensure that adequate teaching and learning facilities are in place, so that the teachers' welfare issues are addressed, like accommodation, like meals, and this would enable them to properly manage their time, but also enable them to competently apply their supervisory competencies. The areas for future research, I advise that if this is carried out to establish specific supervisory competencies relevant for individual subject teachers, this would help in improving academic performance of that individual subject, which would finally improve. Because if the teacher of literature, another for English, another for biology, knows the specific supervisory competencies that has to apply, and even the factors the environment, school environment has to operate in, then there would be a general improvement in students' academic performance. I picked out some of the references, though not all, and thank you for listening to me.
Thank you, candidate, for your presentation and for the struggle you've made to complete your study. I'll have a few remarks to make on your presentation. I appreciate the confidence you have exhibited in presenting your work. And at this point, I welcome you to listening to some of the comments from the panelists, beginning with myself. I need to take you back to your topic. Now, what we are going to do, why I called back the topic, is that as panelists extend their comments, they'll start from the beginning up to the end. So we are starting with the external, and the external, after the external, you receive comments from the internal. We shall proceed. Our external, Dr. Badiru Musio, welcome to the commenting of the students' presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. First, my name is Badru Musisi. I work at Makerere University, College of Education and External Studies. And I also taught here for quite some time. And I'm glad that you gave me this opportunity to look at the candidates' work. I wish to thank the candidate, Ms. Kabugo, for coming this far to the point of producing this work. Before I say anything else, I wish to congratulate you on this achievement. I'm going to focus more on some of the crucial issues that I observed. The rest, I did some writing in the book. I hope she will be free to look at it after here. My work here is more about helping you to improve your work. You are not in the court of law and you are not in the dock. We are all here to help you improve your work and you get this over with. I'm going to go through this chapter by chapter, but let me first ask a question. What exactly do you mean by teacher supervisory competencies? Forget about this, your book, just to a layman's understanding.
Because one thing I realized, these government schools have big numbers, so their fees are too high. If the teacher able to supervise, to assess, and to follow up individual teachers tracking against students, that is the supervisory part. Monitoring, so somebody is corrected, somebody is doing, but somebody is. This terminal progress in learning is one thing.
Oh, okay. That sounds a lot better than what you put down. But remember, what you say now is blown away by the wind. But what you write here is for posterity. So I suggest that you extend that clarity to what appears here, because your operational definition of supervisory competences in the book does not measure to what you just said. So try to improve that. Then the background was okay, but now I'm going to ask you a question about the objectives. The issue with the statement of the problem, you will read in the book, but the objectives. You have a general objective, which is the purpose, and the specific and three specific objectives. Could you please quickly verbatim read the specific objective? Sorry, the purpose or the general objective from your Okay, thank you. You can stop there. So here you are talking about assessing the extent, but thereafter you are talking about the effect of supervisory competencies on teacher, on students' academic performance. So help me understand this. Is assessing at the extent the same as the effect?
Because if I'm assessing the extent, I'm trying to see how much the supervisory competences contribute to students' academic performance. And the effect is, if I say effect is like contribution, how much does it go? I think that's it. I stand be corrected.
Okay. All right. They are not the same. Exactly, they are not synonymous in that case. But now, what is now? Go ahead and read the objective number 1.
To analyze how teachers supervisor competencies affect student academic performance.
Okay. And what is now the difference? What is the question is how specific is a specific objective number 1? If you compare that to the purpose you just read it to us, or the general objective you just read.
The objective number 1 is specific in that it goes down to look at the various teacher supervisory competencies, the quantitative, the personal, and leadership, and how each of them affects. And then finally, these findings are not going to come out with the purpose, because together I'll be able to come out with a model by seeing how much students.
Thank you. Ms. Kaw, it's what I can see there that counts. Now we are in the details. But if I look at objective number 1, I look at the topic and I look at the purpose. They are just the same stuff, slightly differently paraphrased. And for a specific objective to be specific, you need to unpack your key variables. But apparently, again, you are talking about supervisory competencies. I'm glad when you read through those components come out clearly. My question is that in specifying that objective, why didn't you bring out those specific elements as independent components of supervisory competencies, like unpacking it? You used what? You used what? I used one objective maybe the concept of one-to-one is new to me, but now if we are to go by that, my suggestion would be a 3-to-1. A 3-to-1 in the sense, what are the three components of supervisory competencies? So put those three together, they add up to supervisory competencies. Then if you are talking about specific objectives, I would assume that those three components would represent the specific bit of your objectives. But once you continue lumping it together as supervisory competencies in a specific objective, which is more or less the same as your purpose or general objective and the topic, then there is nothing specific about objective number 1. And that, the ghost of that lack of clarity at that point, I was bound to haunt you throughout. And yet you have those three aspects clearly brought out. So I'm just wondering why you didn't capture them at that point so that the reader can see that thread running through your work up to the final end. So that is a crucial aspect you need to consider. And also you have to revisit that bit of one-to-one, one-to-many, and that, because that's where that's the gist of that matter. Otherwise, I would assume that with that objective number 1, you would probably not need 2 and 3 because the entire study is lumped up in objective number 1 as per your study topic. And then let's get to the significance of the study. I would assume that at this level, PhD, you go beyond the what. Actually, with the significance, we're really more interested in how the study will be of value to the different stakeholders, which is conspicuously missing. So upgrade the significance from the what to both what and how, but more emphasis on how. Then about the unit of analysis and unit of observation. What is your unit of analysis? And what is your unit of observation? Don't you think it's the other way around? But in your topic, teachers' supervisory competences and students' academic performance in government-aided secondary schools, Hoima district. So don't you think that the government-aided secondary schools are your unit of analysis, and the teachers, the people you collected the data from, are the unit of observation? Think about that. Then chapter 2, let's look at your conceptual framework. At the beginning in chapter 1, it appeared like your DV, that is dependent variable, student academic performance. You clearly stated it somewhere, even in your definition, operational definition, as that academic performance is about UNEB scores. I had a 9 and a 4 something. Let's a minute. Now look at your DV. I assume academic performance is still your DV, right? Then we have academic achievement, whatever that means, class attendance, student retention, career clarity, student vocational skills. Do all those, because when you are justifying your study in your contextual, you are situating us in the study environment, you focused on students' poor performance in terms of scoring, you even had it clear in terms of percentage. Then here in the conceptual framework, you are focusing on all those. So how do you reconcile that?
All these other factors, class attendance, retention rates, and career clarity, cause them to perform.
And a lot more than you have mentioned. There is so much which you can't have in a single study. So I suggest you bite what you can chew and chew what you can swallow. You consider that. Then chapter 3. Here I will suggest you get to know the difference between positivism and post-positivism, because it appears it's not clear. But then when we get to, what is your research design? That's not what I saw. Maybe we have an Old Testament and a new one. From the Testament I looked at, we are looking at triangulation is something. So that was your research design? So take care of that as well. And again, in chapter 3, every aspect, every component that appears there needs to be clearly justified, scientifically justified, why you opted for that among the so many that are available. So every component needs to be clearly justified. But also looking at your study, it appears like it was a crude attempt to smuggle in this qualitative bit. It is a very distant cousin in your study. You are trying to depict a study which is mixed, right? where you had quantitative and qualitative, but the qualitative aspect was not done justice. And probably I would even suggest you get rid of it completely. For instance, if I may ask you, how did you determine the validity and liability of the interview schedule? Where are they in your book? They don't appear. I know you have a New Testament somewhere, so I'm glad you even I think after looking at this, you thought about it. So make sure that if you are to uphold that, it is clearly reflected in the study, and show us clearly how the qualitative data speaks to the quantitative data, where they agree and where they conflict, and give us a clear explanation. Again, show how that qualitative data was analyzed. Now, in your in the data presentation, analysis, and interpretation, what is that? Did you present, analyze, interpret, or you presented, you analyzed and presented? So I saw the analysis. Let me cut this short. Was it objective number 1, where you had an R square of 0.96 something? I'm judging you from what I saw. I haven't looked at the New Testament. So I hope you cannot have that. You cannot have an R square of 0.96. Forget about the theoretical bit, but in reality, you can't have that. I'm glad you noticed it and you are taking care of it. So that, you know the problem? The problem is failure to decompose the your IV into those 3 aspects, because each of those aspects should have been reported independently. But once you lump them together, talk to the statisticians around, they are going to tell you what happens. They even have beautiful technical terms for that. So, Madam Kabugo, like I said, the details are in the book and probably the report. There is a lot more, but I just pointed out the key aspects. I once again congratulate you for getting this far, and I hope you'll finish your study soon. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Chair. I am Associate Professor Norman David Nsedeko, trained teacher by profession as well, to teach in tertiary institutions and also in secondary school I would like to congratulate the candidate, Mrs. Kabugo, for reaching this far and presenting. That's very, very important. Now, research is for the public good. And for us who are interested, researchers, academicians, we are interested in consuming reliable and valid research from start to end. Therefore, my assessment are going to reflect this. Is the research process reliable and valid, whereby it can be consumed and we make policies based on the findings? Now, I have some issues. The first one is the study variables. And the external examiner has taken a lot of effort, time to examine these issues. Then the second one, the study hypothesis. The third is methodology. Then the fourth area where I wanted also to have some clarification and defense is analysis of data. And the fifth, contribution to knowledge, which is chapter 9. Now, I wanted to ask before we continue, what is your dependent variable? Can you help us to revisit the dependent variable? Secondly, and how did you define it operationally? Because that's where we can get the data, reliable data, after having given us the operational definition of a variable in your study.
And therefore, the operational definition is the knowledge and skills gained by the student as reflected in the academic grade attained at the time of the ordinary level question results from one's regular class attendance and perspectives. And then
now, in simple terms, here the audience and others have children in O-level. They are going to do the exams. And at the end of it all, how will they judge the academic performance of their children? Can you go to page 91, Conceptual Framework? Then look at the dependent variable. Is that how the parents who are waiting for the results, the performance, academic performance at all level are looking for? Academic performance at the end of all level, are they going to wait to, is UNEB going to give them class attendance, academic achievement, student retention rates? Is that what they are looking for, or they are looking for grade 1, grade 2, grade 9, that kind of thing? And I thought that according to your operation definition and your observation in Hoima secondary schools, you are looking at those grades that, oh, these schools are not performing well because of so many division, 9, you said 4th division, 9 division, most of them are there. Yes, then how is that performance, academic performance, related to your academic performance variable, dependent variable here? So I have a problem with that. Secondly, how did you measure academic performance? How did you measure academic performance? Which academic performance? Mhm. Now, when you go to page 182, 185, 193 to 196, there's not there's no relationship with the measured academic performance as you operationally defined it. And as you noticed that there was poor performance. Good. So my observation, according to study variables, is that the DV, as measured in the study, as you have just told us, deviates from the operational definition given on page 2, Latin numerals, page 14, paragraph 2, and also on page 2. Now, class attendance, career clarity, school dropout rates, and vocational skills, as indicated on page 139, which are applied to measure academic performance, do not define academic performance benchmarks as per UNEB and as per the history you have told us of poor performance in Hoima district among the 9 senior secondary schools. Poor performance was measured on the criterion of divisions, division A up to division 9. Hence, the study has no DV as stated in the study aim, purpose, and objectives, research question, hypothesis, and the operational definition of the study. So, in conclusion, the analysis and the conclusions that have been given to us in your write-up do not emanate from the overall methodology designed for this project. Now, I go to the second observation, that is the study hypothesis. Now, hypothesis, let's go to the hypothesis, please. Let's go to the hypothesis. Okay. Hypothesis 2 and hypothesis 3 are redundant, as it has also been observed. Okay. Why? You are testing a moderator variable which cannot stand for IV. Okay. A moderator variable. Number 2, school factors have no significant influence. And when you go to the research aim and the purpose of the study, they do not cater for the moderator variable. Okay. So in your analysis, you would have included the moderator variable to come up with moderate effect between independent and dependent. Moderator stands in between. But nowhere is it shown that you made an analysis to find out the moderator effect. Okay. So there is no way you can run any valid hierarchical multiple regression analysis in the way these hypotheses are stated. Now let's go to methodology. As also noted, the philosophical paradigm and the study design, they are questionable. Because you have told us that you collected quantitative data and qualitative data. Okay. Now, this would imply that you used mixed methodology, mixed approach, the mixed approach study. And mixed approach study basically is pragmatism. Okay, the philosophy that explains that is widely used is pragmatism. Now, as also it has been stated that positivism does not fit triangulation. Does not fit triangulation. So there is a problem here. What is triangulation and what is mixed method approach? Okay. Now, data collecting instruments. Now, the questionnaire items for academic performance as per your instruments are similar to those found in a teacher supervisory competencies questionnaire. Now, what is the difference? Then, who developed this questionnaire? I wanted to ask, who developed the questionnaire?
I developed them myself.
Okay, thank you. Now, when you're developing a questionnaire, we have different steps today so that we may come up with a questionnaire that is valid and reliable. And what I observed in your questionnaire, and as you explained it, just covered one step of developing a questionnaire. And that is the model specification. Okay, where you develop items, then you give them to experts, they rate them. Okay, that is the first step in measuring, in developing an instrument, especially an instrument that has latent variables and observable items. Okay, latent variables, those are the major, okay, the major segments of the instrument. Then the items, what explains that? Okay. Now, the issue is that the process is incomplete. You would also have tested, you would have applied, okay, factor analysis. Okay. Factor analysis is not there. So that we may find that the items that I have thought to explain these latent variables, okay, can be retained or rejected. So if you never went through the whole process of developing an instrument, involving also confirmatory factor analysis, then you cannot reliably tell us that your instrument is reliable and valid. Just one first, the step of CV, okay? The first step alone is not enough. Okay. Next, you said that you collected qualitative data. Now, for what purpose did you collect qualitative data? Because it is not part of the objective, neither the research questions. how did you smuggle it into your study if it is not part of the objectives? Because the objectives direct us to how we are going to, to collect data, analyze it. Now, if it is not catered for, as it has also been mentioned, it's better that you remove that as well. Okay.
But excuse me, I had research questions, and the qualitative data was to confirm what I had got from the quantitative data.
Now, in mixed methodology, you have to state your quantitative objective or such question. You have to state your qualitative question, okay? Because these are different. We're using mixed methodology, quantitative and qualitative. Then you have also to state a mixed method, okay, questionnaire objective. But what you have stated is just for quantitative, okay, for the quantitative approach. Qualitative is not there. Now, let's go to data analysis of data. Hello. 1 minute. Okay. Analysis of data. According to your research problem, you have stated that you want to do a cause effect. You want to find out whether this one causes the other. But then you are doing correlational research, where there is a relationship in magnitude or direction. Okay. What is the cause and effect? Look into that. Then contribution to knowledge. How much time did you take to test the model that you developed?
It took 3 months.
You took 3 months.
Yes, and it's indicated in the book.
And yet you told us that you are analyzing data of performance for 5 years. This year they got this year they got that. Now, how can you tell us that you tested a model in 3 months and you came up with conclusions, okay, of how people have improved, in how the students or schools have improved, okay? In what? In performance, just in 3 months. It would have been a longitudinal study to find that, oh, the teachers have been treated to the competences as such. This year, they improved. Next year, they improved. So that you may come up with a conclusive evidence that this model is working. But in just 3 months, when students have not even sat exams. Now, how are the teachers, okay, treated through the model, the competence aspect of improving their performance?
There was an interruption of the COVID issue, lockdowns. So what I did, I used their end of term assessment to see how they have improved.
See how they are, well,
the students had improved.
I didn't find that in the write-up. Okay. Take note. Okay. So thank you very much for listening, and I hope that our work is to help the candidates in coming up with reliable and valid data so that the outcome of it can help to address issues of society. Thank you so much. All the best.
Thank you, we now have Dr. to extend his comments to the candidate. And Doctor, you have 5 minutes, please.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. It's not working. Okay. I would like to say thank you. The candidate has tried her level best to really show that she would like to shift from one level to another. Thank you for your presentation. I would like to thank you for that. But I'm imagining that you've left us in, you found us in a house, a room like this, and you are living just here. How shall we know what is outside? That is my comment on your background. You need to show us what is happening out there, so that we may know that you are taking us in the right direction. I don't see any comparison, any related literature concerning what is happening out there in the different countries, where we can copy live. That is quite fundamental. Then I would also like to comment on your font. It is varying through the book. Typesetting is another important factor you need to address. Another point is concerning your validity. It's not given anywhere. Who were your independent judges? They are not indicated anywhere for verification of the data you have given us in this book. Then concerning your reliability, it's not given in this book. Alpha, how did you arrive at your alpha? We need it in this book. Then I was also concerned with the way you were presenting on some pages, discussing, yes, yet you are giving just your findings. Why did you mix the two? You were mixing presentation and findings. Why were you mixing the two on some pages here? I'm not going to open, I have 5 minutes. You need to separate your discussion from your presentation, I mean, from your findings. It is quite vital because we get confused, people get mixed up. You present your findings, after a while, you start discussing. Why do you mix these two? They should be separated out. There is no consistency. That is a comment I have for you. There should be consistency in your write-up, so that when one starts reading, he feels that is reading work that is worth to read, other than you going to mix up everything. You were meddling in that area. Then maybe I would like to see your discussion clear. It's not clear. I've not seen your discussion clearly spelled out, because in one of the chapters you never even discussed. You simply presented and left it hanging. So we need, I mean, one of the objectives, you left it hanging. You never discussed. To look through this report, because I've read it. Then there are some simple spelling errors in it. Then your contribution to knowledge. You could tell us a new area and you reflect it even under your abstract. The most crucial area. You give direction to the future researchers on how they should really help us to improve on education. That is quite vital. Then I was surprised how you could copy and paste a table here. There is a table you copied and pasted on Conceptual Framework. Why don't you say that adapted and modified? You a PhD student, why do you write things like that? You don't simply copy and paste and then we take it for granted. What new knowledge have you added to the table, the Conceptual Framework? We need to know that you are becoming a PhD student who can give us new knowledge. Yeah, I think, then I never understood properly the model. How were you operationalizing that model? You need to teach us so that someone who reads your model can really understand it clearly. The model is not quite clear. Other areas, my seniors have already mentioned. your significance was really narrow, too narrow for a person at your level. I do not repeat what my seniors have said, fold it up. I think at this point, I would like to, then another thing, you never described properly the conceptual framework. The description of it, we need to see the variables, how they relate to one another as you described them down there. I think you went ahead to start quoting the literature from other sources. That's not allowed here. As far as the conceptual framework is concerned, you don't bring in foreign literature. You relate the variables, the dependent and independent variables. And even you need to tell us how the other moderating variables can easily interfere and how you are going to iron them out, make them constant. I would like to end there. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you, Doctor. We are having Dr. Businge next.
Thank you. I want to thank the candidate for such contribution. Some of us who know the candidate, there is a great improvement in this work compared to the previous works. However, it is not final. There's still things to do. And I want the candidate to note down the following. This study has 2 research designs, which is not necessary. And if it is necessary, then you should give a justification. In chapter 3, we identify, define, and give a justification why we are using such our options we have decided to use. But when you look at in so many areas, you did not define the concepts, especially the sampling techniques. You just used them, and someone does not know what you mean. If you check on page 144 and 108, if you look at the sampling techniques you used and the number of selections you used, it's actually a tragedy. When you use convenient sampling and purposive sampling on 144 respondents, it's really a tragedy. And when you go to chapter 3, I've also mentioned it to define, but in chapter 4, you didn't make the right interpretations of the study. So when you calculate the relationship between variables, and you find that there is a relationship between the variables, it does not necessarily mean that the relationship is significant. You need to calculate the magnitude of the relationship between the 2 variables for you to come to the conclusion that the variables, the relationship between the variables is significant or significant. And after then you give us the interpretation of that significance in the context of your study. But in the interpretation, you keep on telling us that it is significant, but what does that mean? What is the interpretation of that to your study? That is what is left out. And that is what you must concentrate on. I don't think you need to maintain the research questions in your study, because your objectives were clearly indicating a quantitative approach. And if you are to include those qualitative studies, then you can focus on interviews so that they can help you cement the findings of the quantitative approach. Then when you go to the conceptual framework, you talked about in the concept, in your objectives, you have leadership competencies, no supervisory factors, and then in your objective, you are having leadership competencies, then which is which? And then it is so common in your thesis, when you are introducing, you want to test the hypothesis, you say you are testing a hypothesis to answer research question 1 or 2. We don't test hypothesis to answer research questions. Okay, so you better say that you are answering the research objective and not research questions. So it is because you did not have a right interpretation of your findings that you find your conclusions, they are so generic. So when you say in conclusion, when you say in conclusion that this variable significant influences this, that should not be the conclusion. The conclusion should be, you should be interpreting and telling us that the variable X contributes this percentage to this, to variable, to the dependent variable. But don't tell us that it is still significant. That's not the right conclusion. And also areas of further research, we are so generic, they need to be specific. Which topics, which areas should really someone do a study on in your recommendations? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kasuja and members, for the guidance of our candidate. You have some minutes given to defend any of the defending your work. There have been many comments throughout all chapters, and your audience wishes to hear your word in that regard. If I come in. Candidate, please.
Thank you very much. The chairperson and the examiners for the issues that have been raised. There are a number of issues that have been raised, but maybe I'll talk about some of them. For example, the dependent variable. My definition of the dependent variable, I think there was a gap, and I will endeavor to correct it so that it comes out clearly. And for the issue of the hypothesis 2 and 3, which are redundant, because I will endeavor to see how I can refocus my work on the main topic, that is objective 1, and then how I can look at the factors, the supervisory factors or the school factors as mediating variables. I analyze them separately. The factor analysis, one of them talked about the factor analysis. I actually carried out the factor analysis. It was on objective 2. for those, the 3 factors, the teacher professional preparation, which had 64%, and the teaching and learning facilities, and then the time management behavior, which had, I think, 53%. The other one had 54 something, but I carried it out. But maybe in the exam did not clearly get it in the questionnaire, but it was reflected in the questionnaire and the findings were also indicated. About the conceptual framework table being copied, I did not get that clearly. Maybe I will be corrected, because I worked it out depending on my objectives and the relationships. So maybe it was referring to another aspect that I needed to indicate that I adopted, but for the conceptual framework, I did not adopt it from anywhere. A mixed up, one of the professors raised the issue of mixing up the discussion, the presentation and analysis. I'll check on that. I stand to be corrected, but I had clearly put down, presented the data, interpreted it, and then discussed it in various sections. But maybe 1 or 2 cases may have happened where I mixed up the 2, but I tried to clearly indicate presentation of data, interpretation, and then the discussion of the data, both quantitative and the qualitative. The future research topic, I appreciate that, and I will look at it so that I can be more specific rather than being general. I think for the other issues that have been raised, I have noted their points of which I need to reconsider and put them right. Thank you.
Thank you very much, candidate, for making highlights on the concerns of the panel. A lot has been raised to make the work better. And please, hoping that you've taken note and a further communication from the postgraduate school will be coming in. Still observe whatever is required for the work to be polished, because we wouldn't want to have that work out when it's not okay. There are some 3 issues that I would like you to take note of. You've mentioned something to do with the corrections you made after, which you called Dr. Badu mentioned a new term. Was it New Testament or whatever it is? But there are changes you made, and please incorporate them in your work. Avoid leaving the mistakes there and bringing in the improved pages to be added to the wrong pages. It will be a mess, so you cannot have it proper. Then the other is, there are major areas like the data you have and its origin. It is very sensitive that you will need to go over it because it influences a big part of your work. You cannot conclude over something that is not proper. And then that particular set that is not proper must have a proper origin as well. So it requires you to do more work in that aspect. The other is, you're studying O-level, and where we are currently, we are having a new curriculum for O-level. You've recommended a model. When you look at your conceptual framework, what you're classifying to be the teacher supervisory competencies have 3 levels. We have the interpersonal, the leadership, and the managerial. My request to you is to clarify to the audience how all this is going to be incorporated in the new curriculum, so that we can say that with the new model that you're coming up with, the output will be reliable.
Can I respond now? Yeah, with the new curriculum that we have incorporates a lot of vocational skills and the student-centered teaching. And I believe that with what I'm proposing as teacher supervisory competencies, the national teacher policy is clearly bringing out the issue of professionalizing the teachers through in-service training. They have already begun by making sure that at least everybody has a degree. And I know that one time, recently I visited the National Teacher Policy Center, the Unity, and I asked them, what is going to happen? How are you going to carry out your work? And one of the things they said that after a teacher has trained for the 3 years, then he's going to be in internship for 1 year so that he grasps what he has learned, and then he can be certified as or registered as a teacher. I know that during that time of internship, some of these things are going to be inculcated into the teacher, apart from the workshops and the seminars that have been going on to make sure that the teachers understand what the new curriculum is and how it's going to run.
Is there anything you would add to what they have designed to make this teacher more competent according to the study you've made?
According to the study I've made, I would think a number of schools do not emphasize induction training, mentorship, and they also don't emphasize workshops, regular workshops for capacity building. So I would think that a lot of these capacity building should be carried out in schools regularly so that teachers don't stay with the archaic information they had, but they keep on upgrading with new information. And then the induction trainings and mentorship would come not only from the senior teachers, but also from officers, maybe at district level, at a ministry level, who come down to teachers in various schools or at the district level, organize workshops and share with them the best teacher practices that they should go on with.
Candidate, thank you. Can you tell the audience how the assessment is done in the new curriculum?
In the new curriculum, assessment is done, it's a continuous assessment. Depending on the competences that the student has presented, because you are given a task which you are supposed to develop on continuously in S1 up to the end of S4. So you are continuously assessed on your progress and what you have acquired as the skills, the practical skills. So you find that the student is assessed continuously on the practical work that is doing or the practical project that is carrying on, for example, tailoring or hairdressing or whatever the person is doing. And then finally is also assessed by UNEB at the end of the cycle.
How do you compare the outcome of the new curriculum and the outcome of the old curriculum? And then when does the teacher come in with his or her competencies? Because I may be a teacher and I have my managerial, my interpersonal, and my leadership. Do you think I'll still be relevant in the new curriculum?
Actually, if I look at the new curriculum, the teacher now is more relevant because a student cannot be involved in a practical training skill and the teacher is not there to supervise, because the student will be carrying out a practical thing where he needs to be guided. If, for example, it's tailoring, has to be guided how to do it. So the teacher must actually practice these supervisory competences to guide the student. So they are quite relevant, these competences. Thank you.
I'll invite our audience, the physical audience, to give in their comments in 5 minutes. And then after, we shall have the physical audience. Sorry, the online audience. So physical audience, please.
Thank you, Chairperson. Thank you, the panel, for all the contributions, because it's been very educative. Thank you, Ms. Businge, Kabugo. You really inspired some of us. Thank you for owning your work. You've been confident. That was my major observation. She did not share. Thank you.
Can I use some of the remaining 5 minutes because they are counting? One thing is the amount of translation that we talked about. We need to bring it clearly. Thank you. Clearly out. If you took methodological translation, you had the question here. You had the interview. Then you also, I had you talk about observation. You didn't. Okay. So whatever you use, you need to clearly bring it out, and it has to be supported with verifiable evidence. It's not just a matter of talking about it, but it has to be reflected in the book.
According to what the many visitors just mentioned, triangulation is accompanied by a series of interview schedules. You cannot rely on an interview schedule to balance your questionnaire and say avoid out any irregularities in the instruments that you have handled you need to go and see on the ground some of these facilities using your eyes. So that when you use that, that is a proper triangulation. There are areas again which are forgotten. You've used this word additionally, over and over. Can you rephrase some of those statements to make them palatable? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you very much, Madam Dorothy, for coming this far. I'd like to agree with Dr. Mukweri that we shall look at those monotonous repetitions. Well, shouldn't be appearing in the PhD. I want to talk specifically for the models and the Unity in particular. I'm part of that Unity program. We're doing something. I would like the candidate, if possible, when you're rephrasing the model, to address the new curriculum, especially the competences and the assessment theory that we have there in Unity. Because once you do that, then what you are putting forward will sell, and Uganda will benefit from it very much. It's something which has also got to be addressed because the PTAs, some of them are averse to the assessment issue by Unity, but your model can be able to address all those issues. As I said, thank you very much.
Thank you, the physical audience. Any questions, Colin? Any one? Let's have the comment. You can read it out.
Yes, hello.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you so much, Chairperson. Yeah, my name is Tadeo Ursoke. Personally, I would like to appreciate Dorothy, the candidate, yeah, for her efforts and coming this far. And I guess, yeah, this is a very important study that is poised to contribute towards changing the curriculum, the educational curriculum in Uganda.
So,
and like I said, mine is basically an appreciation. I really wish to congratulate her reaching this far and to wish her well. Thank you so much.
excuse me, Doctor.
Yes, please.
I would request you to restate your comment, please.
Yes, thank you so much, Chairperson and members of the panel. I hope you can hear me well.
Yes, please.
Yes, thank you. I would like to appreciate the candidate, Dorothy, for reaching this far, and her study can contribute greatly towards the education curriculum in Uganda. And like I said, I reiterate my efforts and I thank her so much for her efforts towards coming this far. That's all. I have no question. I was just appreciating the candidate and her relevant study towards the study which can contribute towards the education curriculum in Uganda. Thank you.
Thank you very much for being with us. The physical audience and our candidate and the online audience. At this point, we shall request you for some minutes so that the panel finalizes its assessment, and we shall have you back for the feedback. Where is the padlock? Thank you, members, for that deliberation. We have listened to our candidate. We have I welcome you back, our audience. And according to the assessment that has been done by the panelists, appreciation to the candidate for having successfully completed the process, an appeal to you to observe the corrections and the comments given to you so that you submit your corrections within 6 months. Other steps to be taken will be communicated to you by the Directorate of Postgraduate. I congratulate you, but encourage you to complete whatever has been recommended. I thank you. By the powers entrusted in me, I hereby dissolve this PhD Viva Voce panel today on 12th April 2022. I owe you.